Alrighty, welcome back. I want to cover a topic today with you around high intensity training. How much is too much? How little should I be, how often should I be training high intensity? Now, depending on what sport you're doing, when I was training for Spartan racing, for example, I wasn't doing much high intensity training. I do some hill repeats and some stuff to make my running pace faster, but realistically, it wasn't until I moved into the sport of Hyrox that I obviously was doing a lot more high intensity training. So this kind of really is quite broad, and it will, depending on where you're at in your training, etc., it will probably relate at some point. So the questions I'm asked often, and something I want to talk about, is how much high intensity training should I be doing? So I would say that any more than 2 to 3 sessions of real high intensity training per week is too much, if I'm really honest, because people get confused with hard training and high intensity training. And the thing is, with high intensity training, with my clients, I refer to high intensity training like 90% of your maximum heart rate and above, right? To make the clear adaptations to aerobic system, we need to be making sure that, if we have the goal of high intensity training, it needs to be pushing that 90% heart rate or above. If we're trying to make strength gains, for example, right, like absolute strength, and we need to break the fibers down and we need to then send it into that adaptation where it heals and gets stronger, then we need to be working up sometimes in the week. We need to be, if we're doing bodybuilding, strength training, strongman, we need to be working 90% of our 1 rep max, right, in order to get stronger a couple of times. So people get really, there's a misconception behind high intensity, right? And the word is just thrown around loads on the gym floor and in Hyrox classes and everything. Everyone's got their MyZone belts on and they're trying to strive to get it into the red as much as possible. But the problem is with high intensity training comes risk, right? With high intensity training comes risk because we need the perfect dose. Like any supplement, right? Any food supplement, we need the perfect dose in order to gain the benefit, right? Because the truth is it can be high intensity training can be our most powerful tool in terms of our fitness and conditioning, or it can be our most dangerous weapon. And what separates the two is the dose in which we get, right? And also how often we're doing high intensity training. So when I talk about high intensity training, I'm talking about 90% or above of max heart rate, for example. So when we're talking about this, it's super important to really think about what's the negative effect of too much high intensity training, or the dose being too high. Well, it can really impact our central nervous system. It can lead to adrenal fatigue, which has a whole host of other problems attached to it. It can lead to inflammation in the body. It can lead to disruption of hormones, inability to sleep well as well. So it can actually prevent us from entering our REM sleep, which is the quality of our sleep essentially is affected. And also it can really affect us in terms of our growth as well and our progress of our overall conditioning. So it can either, if we're doing too much high intensity training, let's take Hyrox as an example. If we're doing too much high intensity training all of the time, what can usually happen is we find ourselves either in a plateau. So if you're following a generic coaching program, the dose of high intensity training might not be right for you, for example. And therefore you might plateau, or you can actually start to experience regression in your fitness because your central nervous system is pretty fucked, to be honest. Your nervous system, your adrenal system is completely depleted. Your energy's low. You're probably cycling fatigue. You get to a Friday every single week on your training plan and you're ending up completely knackered. And what I'm seeing more and more of in, especially the hybrid craze, the hybrid training world, especially with Hyrox, is a lot of preconditioned athletes who are competing well, have a background, right? They've done a lot of high intensity training in their time. They've done a lot of conditioning. They've put their body through, 10, 15 years, 20 years from a youngster of competitive sport. So they have a background. Their body is well conditioned and adjusted, and it can handle quite an increased load of high intensity training. But what I'm noticing more and more of in the Hyrox world is more and more Hyrox athletes who are competitive, people are looking up to, because they're like, I want to compete like that. I want results like that. Because they're getting those results, that must mean that they can help me get them results. But what I'm seeing and hearing more and more about from talking to many clients who I've had pre-calls with or spoken to, or they've reached out to ask questions, is many of these athletes who are coaches are coaching the general population who are now in the hybrid sport world the way that they're training, right? They're like, if you want to train like me, if you want to compete like me, you have to train like me. And then all of these athletes, these everyday athletes, as I refer to, like, I don't know, Sandra, who has got 3 children, middle-aged lady, been a gym goer, went on a weight loss journey over the last 2 years, and now found Hyrox and now is inspired to progress. We can't be prescribing her the same type of training that I would be doing, for example, right? I'm used to high intensity training. I've got volume in me, right? I've got experience. So what we're seeing more and more of is, gyms are, CrossFit gyms and everything, gyms in general are throwing all these Hyrox classes, go balls to the wall, unless you're hanging off the end of that treadmill after 45 minutes, you haven't pushed hard enough, for example. It's competitive, and that's great. It's incredible for motivation. But we're finding that people that are doing these Hyrox classes, they're starting to put more and more Hyrox sessions on 4, 5, 6 days a week. And all of these people are plateauing, or they're ending up injured, or their central nervous system is completely wiped out before they even get to their competition, which is their end goal. So I wanted to kind of really stress this today, because the right dose of high intensity training is important. Okay, really, really, really important. And like I said before, if we tip the balance, then we are in a space of, intensity leading to fatigue. We're in the risk of that when we start incorporating high intensity training into our weekly schedule. So if you're working for 90% or above 2 to 3 times a week, I would say that that's a generalized, great amount of dose for training. And anything more than that, I think that you are going to be struggling with nervous system fatigue. And you're probably going to find that eventually you could potentially regress in terms of your conditioning and also burn yourself out. All right. So listen, any questions you've got, feel free to drop a comment below. If you're preparing for Hyrox, you're probably wondering right now, well, if I'm doing high intensity training 3 times a week, Hyrox classes or Hyrox style sessions where you're working hard, I would say that the other side of things that you need to be doing is focusing on your aerobic baseline, right? Zone 2 training, implementing some, 80% strength work to build towards the sled work. That stuff can be encompassed in that training week. I would say that for me personally, and at the moment I'm in a training phase where I'm trying to prepare for Elite 15 qualification. So, the highest level in Hyrox at the moment that you could compete at. I would say that for me personally, no more than 20% of my week is at high intensity, for sure. That's 1/5 of my training every week spent at 90% or above. The rest of it is a mixture of, zone 2 work, strength work, and also threshold, which isn't, I don't personally think, I think that's hard training. It's not high intensity. I'm not pushing 90% and above. If anything, I'm probably sitting, somewhere between 75 and 85% of my max heart rate for my threshold work. And I would be aiming for that type of thing in a lot of my sort of Hyrox conditioning pieces as well. And then I would be, as I call it, going balls to the wall, 2 or 3 times a week. And those would be kind of like shorter efforts in terms of overall training time, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So I hope that gives you some tips right now. I hope that helps, especially if you're a little bit lost when it comes to how often you should be incorporating high intensity training into your schedule. Plenty more where this come from. I'm really excited about some things that I've got that I'm looking to release very soon when it comes to like programming, processing, especially if you are training for hybrid and Hyrox especially. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to hit subscribe. I will see you for the next one. Take care. Peace out.